As the room grows quiet, let your thoughts sail away. Take a slow breath in and let it go. Feel the air move gently through your chest, soft and quiet like the tide pulling away from shore. The weight of the day begins to lift, leaving only calm behind. The world around you grows softer now, its edges fading into something warm and still. In this space there is no hurry, no sound that needs to be chased. Only stillness, only peace. Above you, the night stretches wide and endless. The stars shimmer like distant echoes of thought, scattered across the dark in delicate silver threads. Each one seems to breathe with quiet rhythm, pulsing softly, as if sharing the heartbeat of time itself. The air cools, smooth against your skin, and every small movement feels slower now, like a feather turning in air. Somewhere far away beyond this calm, a faint light flickers in an old room. A table sits beneath that soft glow, its surface covered in dust, and on it rests a sheet of fragile parchment. The ink upon it has faded, yet the words still hold their breath, waiting. Someone once sat here, centuries ago, tracing each letter by hand. Outside, the wind whispered against stone, carrying with it the scent of distant rain. Inside, everything was quiet except the soft sound of a pen gliding across paper. This is where our story begins, in silence, not ceremony. The parchment waits beneath time's gentle weight, and its words remain untouched and patient. They are not loud, they do not command, they simply exist, humming softly in the space between memory and dream. You can almost imagine the candlelight trembling over the surface of the page, casting golden ripples across lines of thought written long ago. The writer looks up at the sky, at the slow turning of the stars, tracing their paths the way one follows breath. The stars become symbols, the patterns of the heavens like music that never stops playing. Every flicker holds meaning, every spark a story. Now let that image settle deep in your mind. You are no longer here or there. You are between the moments, suspended in the same stillness that has carried words across centuries. The room fades. The stars remain. You drift closer to the faint echo of that ancient rhythm. Time feels different here. It no longer moves forward or back. It expands softly, stretching out like a sigh that never ends. You feel weightless, like you're floating through the quiet air of another world. Every heartbeat slows, every breath deepens, every thought softens into calm. And somewhere within that peace, the first page turns, the paper stirs, the ink awakens. The story, once forgotten, begins again, not to teach, not to explain, but to simply exist, like starlight on water. You are part of it now, floating, listening, breathing. The night hums softly around you. The world sleeps and so do you. Our journey begins with the rediscovery of an ancient manuscript once thought to be lost forever. It was hidden for generations, resting quietly beneath the layers of time, passed from one careful hand to another. Its fragile pages carried not secrets of faith, but records of wonder, the quiet reflections of those who once studied the natural rhythms of the world. This collection of writings came to be known as the Book of Enoch. It is not a book of belief, but of observation, a poetic record of how early people understood their place beneath the stars. Through its lines, they described the movements of the heavens, the slow procession of the moon, the glow of the sun marking the changing of the seasons. To them, time was a living presence, something to be watched, measured, and respected. For countless years, these pages survived in quiet isolation, preserved by the patient hands of those who saw beauty in knowledge. The ink faded, the letters changed, but the meaning endured, the timeless curiosity that connects us all to the sky above. When the manuscript was finally found again, it felt as if time itself had exhaled. The world paused, and the voices of those ancient observers were heard once more. They spoke not in command but in wonder, describing a universe both vast and intimate, where every star was part of a grand, gentle rhythm. And so our story begins, with a rediscovery and the soft return of light to a forgotten page, the Watcher of the Sky. Imagine now, in the deep quiet of ancient time, a man sitting beneath the open sky. The air is cool, touched by the faint shimmer of distant stars. Around him, the world rests, mountains softened by shadow, fields breathing under the hush of night. In his hand, a smooth piece of stone, and beside him, a slender stick blackened by fire. He tilts his head upward, eyes tracing the glittering map above, and begins to draw. Each mark is a memory, each line a rhythm. The man's name is Enoch, the observer, the listener, the recorder of what the heavens choose to reveal. He is not a figure of power, nor one of myth. He is a man of patience. His world is not filled with noise, but with quiet observation. While others sleep, he watches. He follows the path of the moon as it slips across the horizon, counts the moments between sunrise and the first blink of twilight. He notices how the air changes with each season, how the wind shifts when the earth tilts just a little more toward the sun. For him, the universe is not distant or unreachable. It breathes with him, moves with him, hums softly through the ground beneath his feet. Sometimes he closes his eyes not to rest but to listen. The night carries subtle sounds, the faint hum of insects, the rustle of leaves, the deep heartbeat of the earth. To Enoch, these are not ordinary noises, they are the pulse of a living world. When he opens his eyes again, the stars have shifted slightly. Their positions whisper numbers and patterns, gentle truths that wait for a patient mind to notice. He writes them down, not on paper, but in the language of marks, circles, and quiet meaning. He studies the sun too, though he must squint through the glow of early morning. He stands on open ground, facing east, his shadow long behind him. Each dawn he marks a line in the dirt. Over time, those lines form a pattern, a calendar, a dance of light and shadow that tells him where he is in the long turning of the year. He does not call it science. He does not need a word for it. To him, it is simply listening to the rhythm of the sky. At night, the moon becomes his companion. He watches its slow, graceful phases, the tender curve of its edge, the soft bloom of light spreading across its face, the steady fade back into darkness. He notices how the tides change with its pull, how the air feels heavier or lighter, depending on its glow. He is not seeking power or prophecy. He is seeking balance, the simple harmony between the world above and the world below. And when clouds cover the stars, Enoch does not stop watching. He studies the silence instead. He traces the curve of memory, recalling where each constellation belongs. He knows that when the sky clears, they will be waiting, right where they have always been. This, to him, is comfort, that even in darkness there is order. Even in silence there is movement. Even in uncertainty, the world continues to turn with quiet grace. The people around him begin to notice. They see him gazing upward for hours, marking stones, drawing shapes in the sand. They whisper that he is different, not strange, just still. Some bring him questions about the weather, about planting, about time. He answers with patience, explaining how the sun lingers a little longer before harvest, how the stars rise earlier when the cold is near. His words are calm, his tone soft, like water, smoothing stone. He teaches without claiming to teach, speaks without needing to be heard. Through Enoch, we glimpse something ancient, the first spark of human curiosity, the need to understand without conquering, to observe without altering, to live in rhythm with what already is. He becomes a bridge between earth and sky, not through belief, but through awareness. His gift is not revelation, but attention. The kind of attention that takes years to perfect, the kind that turns stillness into understanding. As the night deepens, Enoch lies back on the ground, his eyes half closed. The stars above shimmer gently as if breathing with him. His heartbeat slows to match the pulse of the earth. For a long while, he says nothing, and the universe says nothing back. Yet, in that silence, something eternal hums. A language older than words, carried only by calm and patience. You can feel it too if you listen. That slow, steady rhythm, moving quietly through your breath, your body, your thoughts. The same rhythm Enoch once felt beneath the vast sky. The same rhythm that still turns above you now, unseen but constant. As you drift deeper into the night, you become part of that quiet observation, peaceful, endless, and beautifully still. The endless hands of time. Long ago, before history had a name, words began their quiet journey across centuries. They were not written all at once, nor by a single hand. They drifted through generations, carried by those who found meaning in silence and patience. Each person who touched the text left behind something of themselves, a thought, a rhythm, a shape of care, and so the manuscript grew, layer by layer, breath by breath. It was not a work of power or command, it was a conversation across ages, written softly through time. The book that would one day be known as the Book of Enoch did not arrive like a spark, it unfolded like the slow bloom of dawn. Its pages were gathered over many lifetimes, written, copied, and tended by those who believed that knowledge, once discovered, should not be lost to the wind. The original language was ancient, Aramaic, a tongue shaped by desert winds and soft echoes of the human voice. Each symbol curved gently, almost like the arc of the horizon at dusk. And as the centuries passed, new hands copied these words into other languages, carrying their quiet music into distant lands. Imagine those hands, steady, deliberate, illuminated by the faint glow of a single flame. The air smells faintly of dust and ink. Outside, the night lingers, and the world turns as it always has. Yet here, in this small circle of light, someone is preserving time itself, tracing old letters so that another life, another century, may one day read them. The sound of the brush against parchment is soft, rhythmic, nearly like breathing. You can almost hear it if you listen closely, a whisper of thought stretching through centuries. As the manuscript traveled, so too did its spirit. It passed through languages, through landscapes, through the hands of wanderers and thinkers who saw the sky as a book waiting to be read. Aramaic became Greek, then Ge'ez, and beyond. Each translation a reflection of how people understood the world around them. The words changed slightly each time, like ripples in a quiet pond, yet the essence remained. The longing to understand what connects the earth below to the stars above. Somewhere near the shores of the Dead Sea, fragments of the ancient manuscript lay hidden for thousands of years. The wind buried them in layers of sand and salt, preserving their delicate fibers like sleeping memories. When they were finally uncovered, their ink was faint, their edges torn, yet their message still alive. These small fragments whispered proof that the book had once been read by many, not as doctrine, but as discovery. It was part of the shared breath of early humanity, a record of how people watched, measured, and marveled at the rhythms of nature. To hold even a single fragment is to hold a piece of time itself. Imagine brushing your fingers lightly across its fragile surface, feeling the soft grit of ancient ink, the warmth of human effort pressed into every line. The words may be faded, but their pulse remains. They speak not of belief, but of wonder, the wonder of those who gazed at the night sky and saw more than darkness, who counted the turning of stars, who found patterns in the silence above them. Over generations, the manuscript changed form, yet never its heart. It crossed lands where languages rose and fell, where civilizations bloomed and faded like the tides. Still the words endured. They were patient. They asked for no recognition, demanded no praise. They existed simply to be remembered, a quiet thread woven through the vast fabric of human thought. And now, in the calm of modern time, the Book of Enoch rests not as an artifact, but as a voice, soft, ageless, endlessly curious. Scholars study its passages, tracing the marks of countless writers, and find within them the same quiet pulse that once guided ancient hands. It is a mirror, reflecting how long humans have looked upward, searching for meaning in the gentle rhythm of the sky. So as you breathe here, in the stillness of your room, imagine those distant hands moving again, slow, deliberate, unwavering, ink flowing, stars turning, centuries folding into one another. The manuscript, once scattered and fragile, lives on not just in libraries or in fragments, but in the calm curiosity that still lives within us all. Time does not end, it continues to write. The world does not forget. It whispers. And the story of Enoch, written and rewritten through the endless hands of time, becomes less a book and more a lullaby of the universe itself. The Whisperers of the Sky. But there is a quiet legend, not of power or myth, but of observation. It begins with a group of people the old writings call the Watchers. They were not beings of mystery nor creatures of the clouds, but people of deep patience. They lived in harmony with the world, guided not by rule, but by curiosity. While others hunted, built fires, or slept beneath the canopy of stars, these Watchers remained still. Eyes lifted, hands steady, hearts tuned to the rhythm of the earth. They did not speak much because the night had its own voice, and it taught them in silence. They learned that the sky was not chaos but pattern, a living map written in light. They traced the arcs of stars, marked the slow wanderings of planets, and recorded the way the horizon glowed before the sun even rose. Their eyes became instruments, their minds like calendars. The first measurements of time were not carved in stone or drawn in sand, but remembered through their steady gaze. For them, understanding was not a pursuit. It was a form of peace. Over time, these Watchers noticed how the cycles above echoed the cycles below. When a star rose earlier in the night, the winds shifted. When the moon grew full, the tides whispered differently to the shores. They began to connect the world's hidden rhythms, sky to soil, air to water, heat to seed. The knowledge they gathered did not belong to them. It belonged to everyone who would come after. They passed it on through quiet instruction, through demonstration, through repetition, under the same endless sky. Among their skills was the shaping of metal. In the soft red light of dawn, they learned to coax fire and earth together, creating tools that shimmered like captured sunlight. The sound of hammer against stone echoed through valleys, not harsh, but steady, almost musical. Each strike carried patience, each spark was a lesson. The watchers discovered that heat could transform what seemed unyielding into something new, a reflection of their understanding of nature itself. They observed time not as numbers but as breath. Days moved like tides, each sunrise folding into the next. They began to mark the length of shadows, to understand that when the sun leaned farthest from the earth, the cold came, and when it leaned close again, warmth returned. These patterns became their language, a system of meaning built from silence. The watchers, in their calm persistence, were not simply studying the heavens. They were listening to the heartbeat of the world. At night, they gathered near the edges of fields, their eyes turned upward. The stars shimmered like grains of silver scattered across black silk. They spoke little, pointing only when something rare appeared. A comet, a faint red glow near the horizon, the slow movement of constellations that guided them through the seasons. Each watcher kept notes in memory, carved small symbols on clay, or drew patterns on smooth stones. These were the first maps of the sky, delicate, simple, and true. Their understanding grew like light at dawn, slowly, beautifully, and without end. They shared their discoveries quietly, teaching younger generations how to see, not just to look. The young learned to listen to wind direction, to study the color of clouds before rain, to read the whisper of leaves before storm. It was not magic, but patience, the same patience that moves rivers and shapes mountains. From these lessons came the rhythm of agriculture, the beginnings of craftsmanship, the order of calendars. The watchers never claimed credit. They believed knowledge should flow freely, like water down a mountain stream. Their wisdom spread gently, shaping the first foundations of what would later be called science, though they never used that word. To them, it was simply harmony, the understanding that everything moves together, each part reflecting another. In the evenings, when firelight flickered against stone walls, the watchers would rest. They spoke of the day's small wonders, the way iron bent more easily in the morning, how the air changed when a storm was near, how certain flowers followed the sun as if drawn by unseen threads. Their voices were soft, their laughter unhurried. The night would listen, and the stars above seemed to shimmer just a little brighter, as though acknowledging their curiosity. They believed the world itself was alive, not in a mystical sense, but in the quiet, observable truth that everything responds to everything else. The watchers knew that when you touch one thing, another moves. When you light a fire, air rushes to meet it. When you speak softly, even silence shifts to hear you. The balance of these relationships became their guide, their teacher, their endless fascination. Over centuries, their knowledge spread beyond their small communities. Traders carried bits of it in stories, craftsmen shaped it into tools, farmers used it to predict the turning of seasons. The watchers faded into memory, but their work became the bones of understanding, the silent architecture of progress. Though their names were forgotten, their curiosity remained, woven into the structure of human thought itself. The writings that came to describe them were not about myth or divinity, they were reflections of admiration. Those who later recorded their story did so not to worship them, but to remember them, to preserve the tale of those who first saw the world as an intricate design, each part connected to every other. Their legacy was not carved in stone, but in the pattern of human curiosity, still alive in the hearts of those who look up at the night sky and feel wonder instead of fear. When fragments of these old writings were found, they carried traces of that ancient calm. The ink had faded, the parchment worn, yet the words still pulsed with quiet wisdom. The Watchers, they said, were those who understood the language of the world before it had names. And perhaps that is what made them so enduring. Not their knowledge itself, but their way of seeing, their willingness to listen to the slow, invisible symphony of existence. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine standing beside them. The night air is cool against your skin. The horizon stretches endlessly, the stars above steady and patient. You hear the soft crackle of a small fire, the rhythmic sound of stone meeting metal, the quiet murmur of wind through tall grass. Someone nearby is marking a line in the sand, a shadow, a moment, a piece of time. There is no hurry here, there is no noise, only the feeling that everything you see and everything you are belong to the same breath. The Watchers did not chase greatness, they found it in the smallest things, in the curve of light across water, in the pulse of insects after rain, in the whisper of fire cooling to ash. Their gift was not invention but attention, and through their stillness they taught the world that observation is a form of love, the kind that requires no words, no ownership, only presence. Now as you listen and breathe, the world around you mirrors that same rhythm. The air moves gently, the stars turn unseen beyond the clouds, and within you a calm awareness grows. The Watchers are gone, yet their silence remains, soft as wind, endless as time. And perhaps that is the truest inheritance they left behind. The understanding that everything worth knowing begins not with speaking, but with listening. The Age of Giants. There was once a time, long before memory had shape, when the balance of the world began to tremble. It was said that great beings walked the earth then, immense, powerful, impossible to ignore. Later generations would call them giants, but perhaps they were not beings at all. Perhaps they were the vast forces of nature itself, mountains that moved, storms that raged, seas that swallowed, and forests that reached so high they seemed to touch the stars. In the oldest writings they are called the Nephilim, but if one listens carefully, their story feels more like the earth remembering itself, recalling a moment when creation grew restless and shifted its rhythm. The land was changing, rivers that once flowed clear now swelled and twisted. Forests spread wide, then burned and began again. The air grew heavy, thick with warmth and dust. The skies darkened for long stretches, as if the sun itself had grown weary. It was not a punishment, nor a miracle, simply the cycle of nature rebalancing itself. Humanity, still young and tender, stood small beneath the vast theatre of the world and began to understand how fragile life could be. The people of that time spoke of the giants as symbols of what happens when the world becomes too full, when strength grows faster than wisdom, when the hunger of existence outpaces the patience of balance. They told stories not to explain, but to remember. They carved figures into stone, tall and wide, to remind themselves of proportion, of how small even the mightiest can become when the earth decides to move. In this age, storms came more often. The sea rose, swallowing the edges of familiar land. The air carried strange scents of salt and ash. Animals grew restless, moving to places they had never wandered before. The people watched all of this, their hearts full of both awe and fear, realizing that nature was neither friend nor foe, only itself, powerful and eternal. And though they could not control it, they began to learn from it. The stories of the giants were whispers of warning and wonder. They said that when the world grew too loud, the earth would answer in its own language, through flood, through fire, through silence. And in those moments, humanity would be reminded of its place in the delicate fabric of existence. But these were not tales of despair, they were songs of reverence. The people saw beauty even in destruction, because every ending carried the promise of renewal. In the fading light of each evening, families gathered around small fires. They told their children about the age when the earth was wild and immense, when creatures larger than imagination walked through valleys and shaped the rivers with their steps. But as they spoke, their voices softened, and they would say, "The giants are not gone. They are the mountains now, the tides, the storms that pass through the night. They are reminders that the earth is alive and breathing." And so the legend of the Nephilim became something more, not a story of beings, but of balance. It spoke of cycles that come and go, of abundance that leads to scarcity, of chaos that returns to calm. Every generation found their own reflection in the tale. When drought came, they said the giants had drunk too deeply. When rain flooded the plains, they said the giants had wept. In this way, the myth became a gentle mirror for the truth that the world, like all living things, must sometimes break before it heals. Over centuries, people began to record these patterns. They measured rainfall, marked the seasons of famine and bloom, noted the stars that appeared during warm winds and cold nights. What had once been myth turned into observation, the earliest form of environmental memory. The Nephilim were no longer towering figures of legend. They became metaphors for the Earth's vast, uncontrollable power. Through them, humanity began to understand its responsibility, not to conquer, but to coexist. Still, there were moments when the Earth reminded them of its strength, a tremor through the soil, a storm tearing through forests, the crash of waves against stone. In those moments, people stood in silence, humbled. They understood that life could not be taken for granted. Each breath, each harvest, each sunrise was a gift of balance. Fragile, precious, easily disturbed. They began to notice the signs before change arrived. The way birds flew lower before rain, the way the color of the sky deepened when the air grew thin, the way the animals shifted their paths long before a storm appeared. These observations became the rhythm of survival, a language older than words, written not on paper, but on the land itself. The story of the giants lingered not as fear, but as wisdom. It reminded people to listen to the creak of trees before wind, to the silence of fields before flood. They learned that the earth always speaks, though quietly. Sometimes through the soft rumble beneath their feet, sometimes through the shimmer of light across distant hills. The watchers of earlier generations had understood this. Now the descendants of those watchers carried that same patience, reading the signs, moving gently within the cycle rather than against it. In later centuries, when these ancient stories were written down, they carried the quiet rhythm of those who first observed the world's breath. The Nephilim became symbols of human humility, reminders of a time when nature taught its lessons in ways too vast to ignore. To read their story was to remember the balance between creation and consequence, between strength and stillness. Imagine for a moment standing in that ancient world. The air smells of rain and fire. The earth beneath your feet is alive, trembling faintly, whispering its secrets through the roots of trees. The sky is heavy with cloud, yet the stars behind it wait patiently, hidden but eternal. You feel the pull of the wind through your hair, hear the slow rhythm of distant waves. Somewhere beyond the horizon, thunder murmurs, not in anger, but in memory. As you breathe, you begin to feel what those ancient people must have felt. The smallness, the awe, the strange comfort of belonging to something so much larger. The giants were not gone, they were everywhere. In the motion of tides, in the breath of mountains, in the quiet pulse of the planet itself. Humanity learned to live with that understanding, to build smaller fires, to listen longer, to speak softer. And now, as the centuries fold into one another, their wisdom remains. The earth still moves with slow intention, reshaping itself quietly, gently reminding us that balance is never permanent, but always worth seeking. The legend of the Nephilim lingers like a heartbeat beneath the soil, steady, low, endless. When the world feels too heavy, when the pace of life feels too fast, remember this: even the giants had to rest. Even the mountains were once molten and still found their calm. The earth breathes slowly, and so can you. The rhythm of creation and renewal continues, soft, eternal, unchanged. So breathe now, listen to the quiet hum that moves through the night. It is the same song that has always been there, the voice of balance returning. The giants are not gone, they are sleeping beneath your feet, dreaming of rivers, forests, and sky. And as you drift into rest, you dream with them. Part of the same gentle rhythm, part of the same infinite calm. The language of the sky. When the world was young and silence stretched wide between stars, people began to notice the rhythm of the heavens. They stood beneath the same endless sky we see now, though theirs was darker, purer, untouched by the noise of light. The night was a mirror, and in it they found reflection. They watched the movement of the sun and the moon, the turning of constellations, the slow drift of time written across the sky. From these patient observations came a new kind of understanding, a language not spoken in words but in light. Those who watched the heavens learned to see pattern in what others thought was chaos. The rising and setting of the sun became their first clock, the phases of the moon their first calendar. They marked the longest and shortest days, noticing how shadows stretched and shrank across the earth. The sky became a quiet teacher, and every dawn, every nightfall was a lesson. There were no numbers then, no machines, only memory and the steady rhythm of observation. Over many years, those patterns grew clearer. The watchers realized that the seasons were not random, but part of a circle, a gentle, endless loop that guided the growth of crops, the migration of birds, the cycle of water and wind. They learned to divide the year into segments of balance, a calendar of 364 days, perfectly even, perfectly whole. Each day was a note in a cosmic song, and together they formed a harmony of time. To them, the world was not measured by minutes or seconds, but by the color of the morning sky, the tilt of sunlight on the ground, the position of stars whispering through the dark. The passing of time was not counted, it was felt. Every moment carried texture, cool, warm, heavy, or light, like the slow breath of the earth itself. They understood that time was alive, that it had a pulse. At night, they traced the moon's journey across the heavens, its light silvering the stones, the water, the faces of those who gazed upward. Each phase told a story, the slender crescent of beginning, the glowing fullness of life, the soft disappearance into shadow. They learned that when the moon waxed bright, tides rose higher and the world felt awake. When it waned, the nights grew quieter, the animals slower, and dreams seemed closer to the surface of sleep. The stars, too, spoke in patterns. The watchers named their constellations not out of power, but memory, to remember where they had been, to find their way again through the turning seasons. Each cluster of light was a marker, a companion, a way to navigate both earth and thought. They saw how some stars disappeared with the sun, only to return months later, shining from a new corner of the sky. They knew long before any science could name it that the Earth was moving, a slow and beautiful dance that tied them to the heavens. Sometimes they built markers of stone, tall and silent, aligning them with the path of the sun. On certain mornings, light would pass perfectly between the stones, a golden thread that confirmed their calculations. It was not ceremony, but celebration, proof that patience had meaning, that time had shape. They did not think of themselves as inventors. They were witnesses to the order of the world. Through generations, this knowledge deepened. Parents taught children when to sow and when to harvest, when the rains would come, when to prepare for the stillness of winter. The rhythm of the year became a song shared across centuries, a melody that moved through hearts and hands. The watchers were never seeking mastery, only harmony. Their goal was not to control the sky, but to understand their place beneath it. They observed that every celestial movement had its reflection on Earth. When certain stars rose, flowers bloomed. When others set, the air grew sharp and thin. They noticed that birds followed invisible paths that mirrored the constellations, that tides echoed lunar cycles, that fire burned brighter under certain moons. They wrote these things not with ink, but with memory, passing them from one generation to the next, like whispered secrets of the world. Over time, the sky became a kind of book, vast, endless, yet perfectly readable to those with patience. The sun, the moon, and the stars were its words. Light and darkness were its punctuation. The people learned to read it not by logic alone, but by intuition, by stillness, by trust. They realized that every dawn repeated a pattern that had existed since before their birth, that they were part of something infinite, something that moved whether they watched or not. In this awareness came peace. To understand time was to release the fear of it. Each ending was simply a turning. Each disappearance was a return. The watchers did not grieve the setting of the sun because they knew it was only traveling the other side of the world's breath. They did not fear the long nights because the stars were proof that light never truly vanished. This was their quiet wisdom, that patience reveals what haste cannot. Imagine them now, lying back on cool grass, faces turned upward, eyes open to the vast spinning canvas. The sky above is alive with motion, countless stars drifting like soft embers. The air is cool, fragrant with soil and wind. They are not waiting for answers, only listening. The universe hums its slow, steady rhythm, and they breathe in time with it. The astronomical book, as it would later be called, was born from this kind of devotion, not worship, but attention. Every number, every description of the heavens was written from lived experience, from the quiet awe of observation. The text describes the gates of light, the cycles of the sun, the order of the seasons. A detailed account of the sky's endless dance. Reading it today feels like hearing a song that was always playing, one we had simply forgotten how to listen to. What shines through those ancient words is not superstition, but patience, the kind of patience that measures time in shadows and stars. The 364-day year they described was a marvel of symmetry, a balance of precision and simplicity. Each quarter of the year carried 91 days, a perfect reflection of the turning world. This balance mirrored the way they lived. Steady, deliberate, graceful. Even now, millennia later, we can feel that rhythm in our own lives, the pull of morning light, the comfort of twilight, the subtle awareness of seasons shifting around us. These are echoes of the same observations made by those first sky watchers. Their wisdom flows through us, though we rarely notice. The sky they studied is the same sky we sleep beneath tonight, eternal and unchanged. And as you listen to this story, perhaps you can sense their calm, the patience that comes from knowing the stars will always return, that the moon will always rise, that light and dark forever trade places in perfect harmony. Time, they understood, was not something to master, but to move with, like breath, like waves, like sleep. So let your breathing slow. Feel the rhythm of your heart sinking gently with the turning of the world. Above you, the ancient sky remains, the same silent teacher, the same gentle guide. The sun will rise again, the moon will change again, the stars will trace their old familiar paths. And in that eternal movement there is peace. Close your eyes and drift with that thought. You are part of the same pattern, the same endless, beautiful design. The universe is not rushing, it is waiting, and somewhere between one heartbeat and the next, you become part of its quiet song. The parables of balance. There is a quiet shift that happens when the world grows still. The wind slows, the stars hold their breath, and even the pulse of the earth seems to move in softer tones. In this stillness begins what later generations would call the parables of Enoch, not stories of events, but reflections on rhythm, on harmony, on the subtle balance that lives inside all things. It is the voice of time speaking in whispers, the language of the universe when it wants to be heard only by those who are willing to listen slowly. These writings do not hurry, they move like water, calm, transparent, patient. Each passage unfolds like a thought, drifting through twilight, describing not what happens, but how everything is. Here, there are no heroes, no conflicts, no endings. Only motion, endless, balanced, serene. The words describe the world as a living breath, expanding and contracting in eternal rhythm, never stopping, never needing to. In these parables, time is not a line, but a circle. It bends, turns, and returns, carrying with it the soft memory of everything that has been and everything that will come again. The cycle of dawn and dusk, of growth and decay, of beginning and completion. All are seen as one continuous motion. The world, it says, does not rush forward. It simply turns quietly, perfectly, forever. The ancient writers who shaped these parables understood something profound, that balance is not stillness, but flow. A river remains steady not because it stands still, but because it moves at its own pace, guided by gravity and time. In the same way, the universe breathes, slow, deep, unending, finding its peace not in stopping, but in continuing. The parables remind us that to live in harmony with the world, one must learn to flow as it does, to move gently through the seasons of change. They speak of the sun as a steady traveler, never late, never hurried. It rises not out of duty, but out of rhythm, following a path older than memory. It crosses the sky like a quiet thought and fades beyond the horizon only to return again. Unchanged, eternal, patient. The moon follows softer, a companion to the dark, pulling the tides with a tenderness that shapes the edges of the sea. These celestial movements are not commands, not rules. They are songs, melodies of repetition that remind us of the beauty in predictability, the comfort in return. The parables teach that everything in existence breathes in its own way. Stones expand in sunlight and contract in cold. Trees exhale oxygen and inhale wind. Even silence has a pulse, faint but certain. There is a rhythm hidden beneath everything we touch, everything we see. The key is not to control it, but to listen. When one learns to listen, even the smallest moment becomes infinite. In the soft tone of these writings, the world is described as a great heartbeat. The oceans are its lungs, the wind its whisper, the stars its unblinking eyes. Every creature, every leaf, every drop of rain participates in this slow symphony. Nothing exists alone. Every sound, every motion, every stillness is part of something larger, something gently woven together. It is a vision not of dominance, but of connection, with the understanding that peace is found in participation, not separation. There is a passage that describes time as a string stretched across eternity. The vibrations that move through it are the moments of existence, some loud, some faint, all essential. The parables ask us to imagine ourselves as part of that string, to feel the vibration of life move through us, to know that when we breathe, we do so with the rhythm of the stars. It is a thought both humbling and soothing, that the same pulse that moves the tides also moves our hearts. Sometimes the writing drifts into silence, as if the author paused to watch the sky or listen to the sound of distant water. These moments of pause are as important as the words themselves. They remind us that understanding does not always come from speaking, but from allowing space for quiet. In that space, meaning grows, slow, unforced, natural. The world breathes again, and with it, we remember our place within it. The parables describe balance not as perfection, but as motion between opposites. Warmth and coolness. Light and shade. Sound and silence. Action and rest. They do not compete, they complete. One cannot exist without the other. The secret of harmony, the writings suggest, is to see both sides not as conflict but as cooperation. The night preparing the way for day, the silence framing the sound. To live with this understanding is to move like wind over water, gentle, consistent, aware. The text whispers that wisdom is not found in knowing, but in noticing. The shape of a shadow, the scent before rain, the soft hum of insects at dusk. These are all signs of rhythm. Life is not a chase toward meaning. It is the discovery that meaning was always there, hidden in the simplest moments. In later passages, the parables turn inward. They speak not only of nature's balance, but of the balance within each person. They suggest that the mind, too, has seasons, times of brightness and growth, times of quiet and retreat. Neither is wrong. Both are necessary. The rhythm that guides the stars also guides thought, emotion, and rest. The ancient writers seem to know what modern life forgets, that renewal requires stillness, and that every stillness is just a softer kind of movement. Imagine now sitting beneath the open sky, the air cool and clear, the horizon wide. The stars above drift slowly, following the same silent script they have known for millennia. The ground beneath you is steady, alive with faint tremors of energy. You can almost feel the breath of the earth beneath your palms. Somewhere in that vast calm, you realize that you too are part of the turning, not separate, not small, just one more rhythm in an endless pattern of balance. As the night deepens, you begin to sense what the parables meant. That time itself is a kind of mercy. It allows everything to pass, to change, to return. The day does not cling to its light, nor the night to its darkness. Each releases itself gently into the next. That is balance, not the absence of change, but the trust that change will always lead back to peace. The final lines of the text drift like fading light. They do not conclude, they dissolve. Every motion, they say, is part of the stillness that holds it. It is a truth both simple and infinite, that rest and motion are one, that every heartbeat contains both the sound of life and the promise of calm. The universe does not end, it exhales, and as you breathe now, you mirror that same eternal rhythm. Inhale, exhale, the world moves with you. The sky above turns, unseen but constant. The stars wait, the tides pause, everything slows to the same quiet pulse. The parables of Enoch were never meant to be read quickly. They were meant to be felt, like a lullaby made of time itself, like a voice whispering across centuries, reminding us that the only true balance is to move gently with the rhythm of the world. So, let yourself drift. Let the words fade like waves against the shore. The universe hums softly around you, balanced, endless, alive. You are part of its stillness. You are part of its song. The dream of creatures. There are moments in the ancient writings when words begin to blur into dreams. The lines soften, the rhythm slows, and the story drifts away from the earth's surface, moving into the quiet landscapes of imagination. This is where the dream visions begin, a sequence of thoughts that feel less like history and more like memory, distant yet familiar, seen through a veil of calm. It is a dream where time is weightless and the world speaks in symbols rather than speech. In these visions, the earth is alive with movement. Creatures roam across open fields beneath an endless sky, each one carrying its own quiet meaning. Sheep wander together in flocks, gentle, patient, and trusting, while oxen move with slow, grounded strength. Birds glide above them, tracing invisible paths across the horizon, and in the distance, the wild animals move freely through the forests, fierce and untamed. Each creature, in its way, tells a story, not of conflict, but of change, of how the world shifts and reshapes itself over generations. The writer of these dreams does not judge or command, they observe. They see how the creatures live and move, how they adapt, how one group grows while another fades. The sheep, soft and steady, represent communities that find strength in unity. The oxen, broad and deliberate, symbolize endurance, the quiet determination of those who build and sustain. The birds are the thinkers, the travelers, the dreamers who rise above the ground to see what others cannot. And the wild beasts, unpredictable, powerful, remind us of the forces that move through every age, the instincts, the chaos, the moments of wild transformation that make life impossible to tame. Together, these images form a story of humankind told not through words but through life itself. The field becomes the world, vast and open. The sky becomes time, stretching endlessly above. The dream unfolds in soft waves, each moment flowing into the next. The writer does not wake, they simply drift deeper, watching as centuries pass like clouds across the moon. At first, the dream is peaceful. The sheep graze quietly. The oxen rest in the shade. The birds move in circles, singing to the wind. It is a portrait of balance, every creature living within its rhythm, the earth humming with quiet harmony. But as the dream continues, something begins to change. The seasons shift faster. The air thickens with the sound of movement. The balance tilts ever so slightly as new generations rise. The writer describes this not as destruction but as evolution. The animals begin to mix, their habits crossing, their territories blending. The world becomes busier, louder, more complex. The gentle order of earlier days gives way to a rhythm that is faster, uncertain, yet full of life. It is as if the dream is mirroring the growth of civilization itself, the moment when simplicity transforms into complexity, when peace gives birth to motion. From the sky, the birds watch the changes below. They see the earth rearrange itself, rivers shifting course, fields giving way to settlements, and people learning to live closer together. The oxen continue to work, their strength anchoring the world through all its changes. The sheep remain, still gentle, still kind. Though their numbers rise and fall like tides, the wild creatures adapt, sometimes retreating, sometimes expanding, always reminding the dreamer that nature is never still. The vision unfolds slowly, without tension, without sound. Every shift happens as naturally as the turning of the moon. The dream seems to say that history is not a series of battles or triumphs, but a long and patient movement, the Earth's quiet way of learning itself. In this dream, no creature is above another. Each one has its purpose, its moment, its voice in the grand, wordless symphony of life. And so the sheep represent the tender beginnings of cooperation. The oxen stand for the age of building, when humanity learned to shape the land. The birds, with their graceful flight, carry the spark of creativity, the imagination that pushes the world forward. The wild beasts embody transformation, the powerful storms of change that make new things possible. The dream moves between them, connecting their stories like threads in a tapestry woven from silence and light. As the dream deepens, the landscape itself begins to glow. The ground becomes gold with sunlight, then silver with moonlight, and finally a deep blue as night takes hold. The creatures continue to move, though slower now, as if they too are drifting toward rest. Their motion becomes symbolic, like the slow dance of stars, each one tracing its arc through the sky. The dreamer feels no fear, no urgency, only a quiet understanding that everything has its rhythm. Every age, every creature, every breath is part of the same endless story. There is a moment when the dream pauses, the air perfectly still, the horizon vast and unmoving. The dreamer senses that they are no longer just watching, but participating. They too are one of the creatures in this field of time. Their heartbeat echoes the same rhythm as the oxen's slow steps, the birds' steady wings, the soft murmur of sheep calling to one another across the open plain. For the first time, the dreamer understands. History is not something that happens to us, it happens through us. The dream continues, showing the passage of ages. Forests rise and fall, mountains erode and reform. The rivers change their paths, the creatures evolve, taking new shapes, new colors, new instincts. The story is long, but never heavy. It moves with the patience of wind shaping stone, slow, inevitable, beautiful. Through these transformations, one truth remains constant: the world is always becoming, never finished. And though this dream is filled with symbols, its meaning is simple: that life is a circle of transformation, and every being, no matter how small, carries a piece of that change. Even the birds that disappear beyond the horizon leave their song behind. Even the oxen, heavy and grounded, stir the soil for what will grow next. Even the sheep, soft and quiet, remind the world of gentleness. The wild creatures remind it of freedom. Together they write the ongoing story of existence. As the dream nears its end, the tone grows softer still. The creatures fade into the distance, becoming shadows of motion against the twilight. The world quiets, as if exhaling after a long breath. The writer's voice slows, almost stopping, describing how the dream dissolves into calm. A return to balance, a return to silence. The field is empty now, but not lonely. It rests, glowing faintly in the dim light of dawn. The cycle, the dream suggests, is complete, only to begin again. When the dreamer wakes, they carry no visions of grandeur, no revelations, only a feeling, deep and still, that everything they saw was true in its simplicity. The world does not need to be conquered or understood to be beautiful. It only needs to be witnessed. The animals, the rivers, the stars, they continue their dance, whether we are watching or not. The dreamer smiles, perhaps, knowing that they are part of that dance, as small and as infinite as the world itself. And now, as you listen, your own breath begins to match that rhythm. Slow, gentle, steady. You can feel the air moving through you like the wind across the fields. You can sense the quiet turning of time, soft and distant. Somewhere inside that rhythm, the dream of the creatures continues, calm, patient, endless. Close your eyes. The world is still moving, even in silence. You are part of it. You always have been. The dream does not end, it simply becomes sleep. The letter of stillness. There is a softness to the final part of the old writings. The words no longer describe stars or storms or dreams. They turn inward, toward people, toward the small and fragile details of living. It is said that this section, what later would be called the Epistle of Enoch, was not a story, but a letter, a message written in the calm voice of someone who had seen the rhythm of the world and wanted to pass along what truly mattered. It is not a sermon or commandment, but a gentle reminder, a whisper from one generation to the next, saying, "Be kind, be patient, be balanced." The letter opens simply. It speaks of harmony, how life moves easiest when people walk together, not against one another. It reminds us that fairness is not something grand, but something quiet. A word spoken gently, a hand offered without being asked, a choice made with care. The writer does not speak of law or order. They speak of balance, of the kind that keeps a community breathing in unison. Live as the earth lives, the voice seems to say, not rushing, not holding back, but turning softly with time. There is no weight in these words, no sense of demand. They flow like wind through tall grass, settling in the heart rather than pressing upon it. The writer encourages a life of steadiness, of waking each morning with calm intent, of listening before speaking, of seeing the quiet worth in simple acts. They say that peace does not arrive with noise or certainty. It arrives like dawn, almost unnoticed, but full of light. One passage describes patience as the root of all stability. It says that those who wait without bitterness, who let time move at its own pace, find clarity where others find frustration. The river never forces the mountain, it says, and yet in time it shapes it. These are the kinds of words that ask for no reply. They simply linger, soft truths that settle slowly, like dust in golden light. Another section speaks of kindness, not as a virtue, but as a rhythm of life. It suggests that kindness is not something we do, but something we are, when we remember that others move through the same storms and silences we do. The writer says, each heart you meet is carrying a sky of its own. It is a sentence that feels like a hand resting gently on the shoulder, warm, steady, unspoken in its comfort. The letter moves gently through ideas of fairness, honesty, and the care of community. It suggests that when people act with integrity, the world itself becomes easier to bear. When truth is spoken softly, it says, even the wind listens. There are no grand lessons, no sharp edges, only the belief that a good life is made from small, deliberate choices. The words feel less like instruction and more like melody, repeating the same quiet theme: balance, patience, compassion. At times, the writer pauses to reflect on what has passed, the long journey of knowledge and experience, the generations who have watched the same sun rise and fall. There is gratitude woven through these reflections, not for what was gained, but for what was understood. The wise, it says, do not gather wealth, but moments of stillness. It is a reminder that time itself is the greatest treasure, and how we use it defines the shape of our days. The letter speaks of work too, of effort not as burden, but as harmony with purpose. It says that when hands move with care, when labor is done in rhythm with the world, even the hardest tasks become light. Build with patience, it says, and rest without guilt. For what endures is not speed, but steadiness. These words seem written for every life, across every age, a reminder that peace is not found in doing more, but in doing with mindfulness. Then comes a passage about forgiveness, gentle and short like a sigh. It tells the reader that forgiveness is not an act of forgetting, but of releasing. To forgive, it says, is to stop carrying what the heart was never meant to hold. There is no drama in it, no insistence, only the understanding that letting go is its own kind of strength. The tone is calm, like someone speaking to a friend at the end of a long day, their voice soft and sure. The letter continues with thoughts about unity, how no one truly stands alone. We are threads, it says, and the world is the fabric we create together. It describes how even the smallest kindness ripples outward, how one calm act can quiet an entire storm. The writer does not promise perfection, they promise connection. When we walk gently, they say, the earth remembers our steps with kindness. In one of its final passages, the letter turns to the idea of memory. It suggests that what we leave behind is not our possessions or our words, but the feeling we gave to others. When you depart, it says, the warmth of your presence remains like the echo of a song. It is a thought both tender and freeing, that the simplest life, lived with care, becomes a legacy far beyond what can be measured. The tone throughout is gentle but strong in its quiet conviction. The writer does not claim to know everything, they only know that peace is possible and that it begins in the smallest moments. There is no urgency in their message, only trust. Trust in the goodness of time, trust in the patience of the world, trust in the gentle persistence of kindness. Toward the end, the letter becomes almost like a lullaby. It speaks of the passing of days, of how the sun sets without regret and the moon rises without hesitation. It says that if we live as the world does, accepting, enduring, turning, then we too can find the quiet joy of balance. The secret of peace, it says, is to move at the pace of the heart. In its closing lines, the writer addresses those who will come after. The words are soft but steady. Take what you have learned and do not rush. Speak kindly, walk slowly, leave space for silence. The world is vast, but its rhythm is simple: to care, to rest, to begin again. The letter does not end with finality, it simply fades like a thought dissolving into sleep. Reading it feels like standing at the edge of evening when light and shadow merge. There is no need to analyze, to question, to explain. The message is simple, the feeling universal. Be kind, be patient, move gently through the world. These are the last words of wisdom the ancient writer leaves behind, not laws, not lessons, but reminders of what we already know. And as you listen now, your breathing begins to slow. The sound of your heartbeat matches the rhythm of the letter. Calm, steady, human. The air feels warm and quiet. Somewhere far away, the stars continue their slow rotation, unhurried, content. The same patience that shaped them shapes you. The same balance that guided the writer guides your breath now. Let that thought stay with you. That peace is not something to chase. It is already here, waiting in the quiet between thoughts. That kindness is not something to learn. It is something we return to. That every day, no matter how heavy, ends in stillness. Close your eyes. Feel the world breathe with you. The letter has been read. Its message remains. You are part of its rhythm now, soft, balanced, endless. The long journey of the book. When the story of the world grows quiet, another kind of story begins. One that does not move through people or events, but through time itself. It is the story of a book written by hands long vanished, carried across centuries by those who never knew its author, but felt its quiet importance. It is the journey of a fragile object that somehow survived when so many others did not. The book that once spoke of stars and balance and dreams found its own rhythm in endurance. For many ages it lived far from the centers of power and noise, tucked into corners of the world where the air was dry, where light was soft, where silence had weight. There, between layers of sand and time, it rested. Sometimes it was forgotten, sometimes rediscovered, then lost again. But always it endured. Ink faded, parchment cracked, and yet the words, those small strokes of thought, remained like whispers, too gentle to erase. Imagine the book lying on a wooden table in a small sunlit room. Dust floats through the air, shimmering in the afternoon light. The pages are thin but strong, curled slightly at the edges from years of breathing in the warmth. Outside, the world changes. Kingdoms rise and fall, rivers shift their courses, new languages bloom. But inside that quiet space, the book stays still. Its presence is not loud, not proud, just steady. Through centuries, hands reached for it. Some curious, some reverent, some unaware of the treasure they held. Each person who touched its pages left a trace of themselves behind. A fingerprint, a sigh, a small moment of stillness. They did not rewrite its words, they only ensured they were carried forward. In this way, the book lived not through miracles but through care, simple, human care, the kind that preserves what it cannot fully understand. The regions that guarded it were distant, often dry, places where the air itself seemed to keep secrets. The climates were kind, warm by day, cool by night, a balance that protected fragile ink and parchment. The winds were gentle, the rains rare. And so, by chance or design, the environment became a keeper of memory. While time eroded stone and metal elsewhere, here, in these quiet lands, the book slept unharmed. For generations it passed from hand to hand, from one caretaker to another. Some copied its words onto fresh pages, line by line, never rushing, never altering. The sound of the stylus against parchment was soft and steady, like breathing. Every mark was an act of trust, every repetition an offering to time itself. The copyists may never have known how far their work would travel, or how long it would last, but their patience became part of the book's story. Imagine them sitting beneath oil lamps, the light flickering softly over their faces. Outside, the night hums with quiet insects. Inside, there is only the faint rhythm of writing, the sound of one mind echoing another across centuries. They were not scholars or rulers, they were witnesses, silent companions of a voice that refused to fade. Because of them, the book's journey continued. Because of their stillness, knowledge remained alive. Sometimes the manuscript rested for decades, untouched, while the world forgot. Then, as if by the turning of a cosmic clock, it would surface again, discovered by someone who recognized not its age, but its calm persistence. The people who found it did not always read it. Sometimes they simply held it, turning its pages carefully, marveling that such a fragile thing could have survived so long. It became, over time, not just a collection of words, but a symbol, proof that human thought could cross millennia when carried by patience. And so the book became a traveler, not across oceans, but through eras. It moved in silence, guided by the invisible hands of time. Each century gave it new guardians, new languages, new contexts, but the heart of it remained the same: observation, reflection, balance. It asked for nothing but endurance, and endurance was given. There is a kind of poetry in this, that something so delicate, made from parchment and ink, can outlive empires. The parchment, once the skin of an animal, became the skin of memory. The ink, drawn from earth and soot, became the blood of continuity. The words, once whispered by a single voice, became part of humanity's shared pulse. In this long journey, there were times of stillness. Centuries when no one wrote about it, when no one spoke its name. Yet even in silence, it endured, waiting for the moment when the world would be ready to listen again. When it finally resurfaced, its letters were faint but legible, its meaning preserved by the care of countless unseen hands. It was as though time itself had chosen to keep it, a quiet promise that knowledge, when held gently, never truly dies. The rediscovery of the book did not happen in a blaze of glory, but in calm wonder. The people who first saw its pages after centuries of sleep described not shock, but reverence, as though they were meeting an old friend who had simply been resting. They examined its structure, traced its lines, studied the way the ink had aged like tree rings. What they found was not just history, but humanity. The evidence of thought surviving where almost everything else had turned to dust. Even today, fragments of that ancient manuscript rest in places of preservation, not behind glass to be idolized, but to be understood. The scientists who study them handle the pages with gloved hands and quiet awe. They look at the faded ink under soft light, scanning every mark, every imperfection. What they see is not perfection but persistence, the resilience of human memory. Each page, each word, is a message that patience is stronger than time. The journey of the book is, in truth, the journey of human care. It is the story of how attention becomes immortality. Every person who took the time to preserve it, to copy it, to shelter it from light and decay, became part of its authorship. The book was not written once, it was written again and again, each time by hands that loved knowledge enough to protect it. That, perhaps, is the quietest form of heroism, to keep something alive simply by not letting it be forgotten. And now, as centuries continue to unfold, the book remains, older than any living voice, yet young in its relevance. Its survival is not an accident. It is the result of unbroken kindness. Somewhere deep in the folds of time, someone cared enough to hold it gently, to keep it safe, to pass it on. And because of that, we can still hear the echo of a mind that lived thousands of years ago. There is comfort in that thought, that even when we are gone, the traces of our patience, the things we create, the kindness we show, the knowledge we share, can continue on quiet and steady, like ink that refuses to fade. The story of the book is not just about words, it is about endurance, about how care itself can defy the erosion of time. As the video reaches its close, the narrator's voice slows, the light dims, the music fades, and the book, resting once again, seems to breathe. It has traveled farther than its writer could have imagined, and yet its essence remains the same, a reminder that knowledge is not fragile when protected by love. Now, as you listen, you can almost feel the presence of those who once held it. Generations of hands, hearts, and quiet devotion. You can sense the patience it took to preserve it, the silence it endured, the centuries it survived. It is more than parchment and ink now. It is a memory of human care. And so as you drift toward rest, think of this, that what we protect with patience will outlast us, that every quiet act of care is a way of speaking to the future. That time, for all its power, still bends to gentleness. Close your eyes. The book is safe now. The words are safe. The world is quiet. You too are part of that chain of care. Another keeper of what endures. The story continues softly. Beyond you, beyond now, into forever. The book awakes. For centuries, the book slept in silence. Its words rested under layers of dust and distance, its voice almost forgotten by the world that had once listened. And then, like the first light, after a long winter, it was found again. The year was the 18th century. The place, somewhere in the vast landscapes of East Africa, where the air was dry and golden, and time seemed to pause between breaths. A Scottish traveller, driven not by conquest but by curiosity, stumbled upon 3 complete manuscripts. Each one carefully preserved, written in a language few could still read. He did not expect to find them. Perhaps he was searching for something else entirely. Trade routes, stories, the unknown. Yet there they were, waiting in their quiet perfection, their pages soft and fragile, yet stronger than centuries. It was as though the book had been waiting for someone to listen again. The discovery was not loud. There was no fanfare, no moment of triumph, just the rustle of paper, the sound of breath catching as the traveller realized what he held. Something impossibly old, yet alive in his hands. He turned the pages slowly, his fingers careful not to tear the delicate script. The ink had faded to the color of smoke, but the words were clear. They spoke of stars, of balance, of time itself. The same voice that had whispered to ancient skies now reaching across oceans and ages, to be heard again. When the manuscripts arrived in Europe, they brought with them a sense of awe and stillness. Scholars gathered not around power or ideology, but around wonder. They unrolled the pages with care, tracing each line like explorers charting constellations. For the first time, in the soft candlelight of old study halls, they could see through the eyes of people who had lived thousands of years before, who had watched the same sun, the same moon, the same endless rhythm of the world. It was not just a book they had found, but a mirror, a reflection of how humanity once looked at the universe with patience, reverence, and unbroken attention. The scholars spoke in hushed tones, afraid that loud words might disturb the delicate memory resting before them. Some compared the handwriting, others studied the structure of the language, noting how it had carried across time like a melody played by countless unseen hands. Each mark of ink was a heartbeat from another era. Each page was a preserved breath of understanding. Decades passed, the world changed again, machines began to hum, cities grew louder, light spread across the night sky. Yet the rediscovered book remained quiet, sitting in libraries and archives, its story now part of the growing body of human knowledge. But time, as it often does, had one more secret to reveal. Almost 200 years later, the desert itself began to whisper. Near the shores of a vast inland sea, the Dead Sea, explorers and researchers uncovered a series of hidden caves. Inside, wrapped in linen and coated in dust, they found fragments of ancient writings. Hundreds of them, scattered and sleeping in the dark. And among these fragments were pieces written in Aramaic, the same ancient language that once shaped the earliest voices of the Book of Enoch. The fragments were fragile, the ink faint, but the patterns were unmistakable. Here, at last, was proof that the book was older than anyone had imagined. These small pieces of parchment, dry and silent, carried the same words that had been copied centuries later in the East African manuscripts. It was as if the world itself had decided to confirm its own memory, to show that knowledge, once born, never truly disappears. It only hides, waiting to be found again. The discovery of the Aramaic fragments sent ripples of quiet excitement through the scholarly world, but more than that, it brought a kind of peace, the satisfaction of continuity. What had once been doubted was now affirmed. The voice that spoke from those ancient pages was real, its origins deep in human history. People who had lived long before cities or borders had looked up at the same sky and written about what they saw. They had measured time, traced constellations, and sought meaning in the rhythm of day and night. The book was no longer just an artifact, it was evidence of endurance. It showed that thought could survive when empires could not, that ideas could travel farther than armies, and that silence, too, could be a vessel of preservation. Across thousands of years, through shifting sands and fragile ink, the human desire to understand had persisted, quietly and beautifully. Imagine now those caves, cool and dry, untouched by sunlight for millennia. The parchment sleeps in darkness, and outside, the desert wind sings softly against the stone. 1,000 nights pass, then 10,000 more. Seasons fade and return, and still the words wait, unhurried, patient, eternal. Until one day a beam of light enters, faint, almost accidental, and touches the edge of a scroll. Dust rises, the silence breaks, and once again knowledge breathes. What makes this story so beautiful is not just the survival of the book, but the way it connects lives across ages. A writer in antiquity pressing ink onto parchment, a traveler centuries later finding those same words in a distant land, a scholar in a dimly lit study translating the forgotten language, a modern reader, like you, listening in the quiet of the night, feeling the same wonder that has passed through every pair of hands before yours. It is a chain of attention, unbroken, delicate, infinite. The Book of Enoch became more than a record of the past. It became a symbol of patience, of how truth can rest quietly for centuries and still awaken when the world is ready. It reminded scholars that discovery is not about force, but about listening, that knowledge, like light, cannot be commanded. It arrives softly, revealing what it must, when it must. And so the rediscovery of the book was not just an academic event, it was a human one. It told the story of endurance, of how care, curiosity, and reverence can bridge the longest distances. Every fragment, every faded letter was proof that even fragile things can last when protected by wonder. As the 20th century turned, the book took its place among the oldest records of human understanding. It was recognized not for mystery or myth, but for what it truly was, a window into how early people saw the natural world, the movement of the sun, the turning of the moon, the pulse of time itself. It stood beside other ancient works, not as something separate, but as part of the long conversation humanity has always had with the universe. Today, copies of the text rest quietly in museums and archives, their pages preserved under soft light. Researchers still study them, tracing the shape of letters, measuring the grain of parchment, listening for the faint echoes of the minds that created them. And though the book is now secure in the hands of history, its message remains timeless, that wisdom endures when carried with care, and that even silence can protect what is precious. Close your eyes for a moment and picture it. A single scroll lying open under the gentle glow of lamplight. Its edges are uneven, its ink nearly invisible. Yet as you look, it feels alive, as if the page itself breathes with the memory of every person who ever touched it. You can almost hear the faint sound of centuries passing, the heartbeat of knowledge preserved. The traveler who found it long ago could not have imagined this, that his discovery would echo through the world, that the book's quiet voice would reach generations beyond his own. But perhaps, somewhere deep within, he understood, because when he lifted that manuscript from the dust and felt its weight in his hands, he was holding more than parchment, he was holding time itself. And now, as you listen, that same time flows through you. The story that began in ancient deserts continues in your breath, in your heartbeat, in your quiet curiosity. The book that once watched the stars is now watching you, asking nothing, offering only calm. Let that calm stay with you. The story has come full circle, from the eyes of those who wrote it, to the hands that saved it, to the hearts that remember it. The book is no longer hidden. It has found its way home, not to a place, but to awareness. Sleep now, in the company of centuries. The book still whispers, the words still live. And the night, as always, keeps them safe. The last whisper of time. As the story draws to its end, the voice softens like twilight fading into night. The book that once traveled through deserts and centuries now rests once more, not as an artifact of mystery, but as a quiet companion to human thought. It has journeyed across ages, written by steady hands, copied through lifetimes, forgotten in the dust, and then, finally, rediscovered. Each moment in that journey feels less like history and more like breathing, the slow, patient breath of knowledge that never truly fades. From its first creation, when ink met parchment beneath a pale sky, the book was born out of observation. It captured how early people looked at the world, not with fear, but with curiosity. They watched the sun rise and fall, saw the stars turn and return, felt the rhythm of seasons, and wanted to understand what it all meant. The book was their record, their quiet attempt to measure time, to name patterns, to touch eternity through observation alone. It was not grand in voice, not dramatic. It was gentle, steady, deeply human. As the centuries passed, others took up the same quiet task. They copied the words again and again, sometimes by candlelight, sometimes under the open sky. Each copyist added nothing of their own, they simply preserved. In every stroke of ink there was patience, in every line, care. The book became a living thread that passed through invisible hands, from one century to another, from one heart to the next. Even when it disappeared from sight, it never truly vanished. It waited, as if it knew it would one day return. Now, after its long and winding path, it rests in the modern world, no longer hidden, but no less mysterious. Scholars read its faded lines, tracing their fingers over the fragile surface, and find themselves transported not into myth, but into the deep quiet of ancient thought. The words are not commands or beliefs, they are observations, the record of how people once listened to the sky. And as you listen now, you can almost hear that same silence. The sound of eyes turning upward thousands of years ago, watching, learning, waiting for the dawn. The book is more than parchment and ink, it is memory. It is the heartbeat of human patience, preserved in physical form. To read it is to feel the weight of time made light. To hold 1,000 lifetimes in a single hand, it reminds us that understanding has always been a slow art, that knowledge grows not through noise but through stillness. The ancient people who wrote it had no machines, no instruments, only their senses and their wonder. And yet they mapped the rhythms of the heavens with astonishing care, recording what they saw with quiet awe. Today, as scientists study the same stars with telescopes and tools of light, the connection remains. The human desire to know, to understand, to find order in the chaos of existence. It is the same now as it was then. The book becomes a bridge between those distant observers and us. It tells us that curiosity itself is immortal, that the act of watching, of noticing, is sacred in its simplicity. The narrator's voice grows slower now, softer, like a candle burning low. Listen, it says without words, to the sound of history breathing. You can almost hear it, the slow turn of the earth, the faint hum of wind across time. Every letter in the book carries that rhythm. The pages, fragile as they are, seem to pulse with life, the same way a seashell carries the memory of the ocean. Each word is a tide that once rose and fell, leaving behind the gentle trace of its presence. The book, after all, is not only about the sky, it is about us, our longing to understand where we belong in the vastness of things. It shows that even in ages when the world was smaller, people looked upward and saw infinity. They measured their lives against the stars, not to feel small, but to feel connected. Their eyes, their thoughts, their writings, all became part of the same universal rhythm. When you imagine those distant writers, you might see them sitting quietly, perhaps under a starlit sky, their tools simple, their intentions pure. They would dip their instruments into ink, made from soot and oil, then draw careful lines across parchment made from the skin of animals that once walked the same earth they did. Their work was slow, every mark was deliberate. There was no rush, only attention, only care. The sound of their writing would be almost inaudible, like the sound of wind in tall grass. Centuries later, that same stillness lingers in the manuscript. When modern eyes meet those ancient letters, there is an echo of calm, as if the quiet of those nights is preserved within the text. The book carries not just information but atmosphere, the gentle patience of those who refused to let knowledge disappear. It is a portrait of time itself, vast, silent, endlessly turning. Now, as the story closes, the focus shifts not to what has been found, but to what has been felt. The book reminds us that discovery is not about excitement, but about listening. It teaches that understanding is born in silence, in the spaces between questions. It invites us to slow down, to breathe, to observe, just as those ancient writers once did. The camera pans over the pages one last time. The parchment glows softly under the light. The ink shimmers faintly like starlight caught on water. The air around it feels thick with age, yet strangely alive. In this stillness, you can sense the passing of thousands of years, folded neatly into a single moment. The voice speaks once more, a whisper. Time moves slowly here. Let it. And as you listen, your breath begins to match that rhythm. Slow, even, patient. You feel the centuries stretch out behind you, not as distance, but as comfort. The book's endurance becomes your own. You realize that every thought you've ever had, every question you've ever asked, is part of the same long conversation humanity has been having with the sky since the beginning. The story doesn't end, it simply settles. The final images fade into dusk, pages closing softly, the wind sighing through the open air, the stars returning to their quiet positions. The narrator's final words are gentle, almost sung. This book has traveled through time, through hands, through silence. It has waited patiently for the world to listen again. Its words are not commands, not myths, but memories. The memory of a people who watched the turning of the heavens and found peace in their movement. And now, as you listen, you too are part of that stillness. You too are watching the stars. The screen dims. The voice fades. Only the faint hum of night remains. The steady breath of the world turning, the whisper of centuries folding softly into sleep. The listener lies still, eyes closed, mind drifting. The book, ancient and eternal, rests once more in silence, its story complete, its message simple. That patience preserves, that time listens, that quiet is its own kind of wisdom. Somewhere in the darkness, the stars continue their endless orbit, just as they did when the first words were written. And somewhere, perhaps in another age, another voice will find these same pages and read them again. Softly, slowly, carefully. The story will live once more, but for now, it is time to rest. Let the pages close. Let the air grow still. The book has done what it was meant to do. To remind us of calm, to remind us of continuity, to remind us that knowledge, like breath, never stops. You can feel that truth settle over you now. Light as dust, warm as memory. The world turns quietly outside. The wind carries whispers of the past across the sleeping earth. You are safe within it. The story has finished, but its rhythm remains. Sleep now, softly, easily. The words have found you. The night holds you. And the book, that patient traveler through time, closes its eyes beside you, waiting for dawn. The final lullaby, rest now, gentle soul. The story fades into silence now. The pages close softly, as if they too are falling asleep. The journey of the book has ended, but its rhythm lingers, slow, patient, eternal. You can almost hear it breathing beside you, like the quiet pulse of the world at rest. Every word that was written, every line that was read, has found its home in the hush between heartbeats. The world outside has gone still. The air feels warm and forgiving. The same stars that guided ancient eyes are shining faintly above you now, steady and kind. They do not rush, they do not fade. They simply are, just as you are in this peaceful moment. Breathe in slowly. Feel the quiet move through you, gentle and deep. Let the weight of the day dissolve into the softness of the night. You've traveled through time, through stories, through memory, and now there is nothing left to do but rest. The voice grows softer still, almost a whisper. You are safe. You are calm. The world turns quietly, and you are part of its rhythm. Every breath is a wave, every heartbeat a slow drum, every moment another step deeper into peace. Let your body grow heavy. Let your thoughts drift like leaves on still water. There is nowhere to go, nothing to prove, nothing to hold. The story has been told, the night is yours. And now, let sleep take you gently. May your dreams be light and kind. May your heart rest easy. May the quiet hold you close. Sleep well, traveler of time. Sleep deeply, softly, completely. The stars will keep their watch. The book will keep its silence. And the world, patient and eternal, will whisper you good night. Good night. Sleep beautifully.